welcome Michael.
All right, so hi everyone. My name is Michael Ty from the University of Queensland. And I just wanted to start off by saying that I have loved all the talks so far, and you know, the statistical analyses have been very impressive, and I am probably going to be giving the most basic statistical analyses you've seen so far, so I do apologize, but hopefully that'll mean they'll be easier to understand because we're demonstrating a really basic effect that hasn't really been demonstrated in the literature before. Very little research has looked into this particular effect, and this is the relationship between cross-group friendships and attraction to outgroup members. Now, intergroup contact theory, probably don't need to explain it, but we have all this literature which shows us that intergroup contact reduces prejudice towards racial outgroups, right? And it's the same with cross-group friendships as well. Now, scholars have argued for a very long time that the best indication that racial prejudice has been completely eliminated in society lies in people's willingness to form intimate, close, romantic and sexual relationships with members of a different race. All right, so many scholars have argued this. And so when we talk about outgroup attraction, right, there is this idea that intimate interracial relationships, right, it's been a very taboo subject for a long time. Okay, so up until recent history, it was illegal, right, to be married interracially. And still today, we see remnants of this taboo and of this stigma surrounding interracial relationships. All right, so this was an ad that was posted on the Twitter of Old Navy official, right? And it attracted a lot of comments, a lot of derogatory comments, right, saying that this was associated with what, white genocide, etc. And so we see that it is still quite stigmatized, and this is reflected in people's unwillingness to engage romantically or sexually with members of racial outgroups. Now, the lack of attraction to or the rejection of potential romantic and sexual partners on the basis of race alone has been termed sexual racism. Okay, so this is quite a contentious topic. Is sexual racism, does it actually reflect racial discrimination? And there's a lot of evidence, all right, building up which suggests that it does, all right? So it is rooted in racial stereotypes, right? It's predicted by things that usually predict racial prejudice, including intergroup warmth, intergroup anxiety, and intergroup bias. It's associated with racial discrimination directly, and it is recognized as being racist, even by people who explicitly claim that it isn't racist to have racial preferences. And if that wasn't convincing enough, all right, sexual racism has the same impact as racial discrimination in the sense that it is disproportionately experienced by racial minorities, and it has the same negative impact on psychological well-being, all right? So it affects depression, stress, anxiety, self-esteem, and life satisfaction. So the question is, if intergroup contact, including cross-group friendships, is a powerful predictor of racial prejudice, can cross-group friendships also predict greater attraction to contacted racial outgroups? And so little research has directly assessed this, but there is research which suggests that this may be the case, all right? So there's research which shows that intergroup contact improves people's attitudes to interracial marriage, all right? It also reduces social distance. Now, the funny thing here is that social distance measures usually include an item or two that is related to attraction, romantic sexual attraction, but it's usually obscured. This direct effect is obscured because these items are collapsed with other items, all right? And finally, the likelihood of being in an interracial relationship increases as a function of the diversity in one's environment, in one's social environment. So this sort of suggests that there would be a relationship between cross-group friendships and romantic or sexual attraction towards racial outgroups. And we sought to test this in the present research, right? So we tested whether cross-group friendships with Black, Asian, South Asian, Middle Eastern, Latinx, I don't know how to say that, Latinx I'm going to say, and Indigenous Australian outgroups would predict willingness to engage with these outgroups in a romantic or sexual manner. Right, so the hypothesis was quite straightforward. Greater cross-group friendships would be associated with greater attraction to racial outgroups. So what we did was we recruited 240 participants, right? They were all white Australians. We actually had 300 participants and removed all the non-white Australian participants. And these were all first-year psychology students. Now, in terms of our measures, we measured outgroup friendships with the measure adapted from Turner and colleagues, right? So how many outgroup friends do you have? How often do you spend time with your outgroup friends? So in place of outgroup, we substituted that with all these different outgroups. We then measured, of course, outgroup attraction, right? So 6 items were developed to measure this. So 3 items gauge the extent to which participants found the outgroup physically attractive, sexually desirable, and romantically desirable. And 3 other items gauge the extent to which participants would have sexual relationships with, romantic relations with, or marry a member of this outgroup, all right? So this was measured for all those outgroups as well. So other control measures included, of course, in-group friendships, given that they've been shown to reduce positive attitudes towards outgroups, as well as social dominance orientation, right? Given that its hierarchy-enhancing ideology could probably influence both platonic and romantic relationships with low-status outgroups, people's perceptions of those relationships. So what did we show? Let's quickly go through this. All right, so I'm going to just break it up by outgroup. So first of all, attraction to Black people was predicted by friendships with Black as well as social dominance orientation. Attraction to Asian people was only predicted by friendships with Asian people. Attraction to South Asian people was only predicted by friendships with South Asian people. Middle Eastern was only predicted by friendships with Middle Eastern people. Attraction to Latinx was only predicted by, predicted by friendships with Latinx people, but also friendships with white people. Right? Not so sure why, maybe because of the widely shared stereotype, the sexualized stereotype of Latino people, but also some people don't conceptually differentiate between Latino and white people. And then finally, attraction to Indigenous Australians was predicted by friendships with Indigenous Australians as well as social dominance orientation. So that's the full model. In terms of what we found, right, this is preliminary evidence to suggest that greater cross-group friendships with each racial outgroup, right, is consistently associated with attraction towards these respective outgroups. And now these relationships were largely race-specific, right? So, for instance, attraction to Asian people was only predicted by friendships with Asian people. So this suggests that maybe there may be no secondary transfer effect when it comes to romantic and sexual attraction. So in terms of limitations and future directions, right, it was cross-sectional, right? So this idea that there are people out there who are really attracted to certain groups and are on the hunt for these groups to befriend them seems awkward, but it could be legitimate. And so we'd need more longitudinal designs, maybe experimental designs to test the causality of these relationships. Negative contact, right? We don't know anything about that. No test of mechanisms or mediators, and does this work in an indirect way? And I think that actually Rhiannon is going to be talking to us about mechanisms as well as indirect contact processes in this domain later in this session. But that is it for me.
Thanks, Michael, for that very interesting talk. Questions?
Hi, I know you said that the other reverse direction may not. I mean, it is obviously possible. And that was immediately what came to mind because if you're thinking about what drives friendships and attraction, is there's still that identification of similarity. So if someone is similar to me. And so I was sitting there thinking, could it be that the reason I'm friends with, pick whatever outgroup you want there, is because I'm in some way, there's something similar about them and I'm attracted to that, and then friendships will progress into attraction. So I guess I was going to say I wouldn't poo-poo the reverse direction.
Yeah.
And I think when you get into the mechanisms, maybe, yeah, that could be something going on there.
Definitely,
So
definitely, yes.
that was more of a comment, just to go, yeah, that makes sense as well, I think.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Thanks, Nicole.
Really interesting stuff. And
Thanks,
I'm just curious if you have any measures of like social desirability, or if you happen to have people complete this online where you could check the latencies for like whether they were slower in responding to cross-race, just to have some indication of any hesitancy. Because especially people who have cross-race friendships, they're like, they want to be good white people.
Yeah.
So any thoughts about that?
Yeah, we didn't actually have a measure of social desirability, and I don't think we can measure latency, but it's a really cool idea. And we are thinking of, well, my research is in the area of sexual racism, but yeah, getting people to sort of respond to, I guess, dating profiles and checking the latencies with which they, swipe left or swipe right, and we could definitely see whether contact has an effect on that latency. Yeah, thanks, Linda.
So I noticed that you talk about like sexual attraction and romantic attraction. You say sexual or romantic attraction, and also your measures combine them.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you considered looking at these two things separately, or do you think that they'll look the same in your results? Because you did mention about the like sexualized groups. I'm wondering if some people might think that they'd be happy to have casual sex with someone from that group, but not be interested in an actual romantic relationship with somebody from that group. So I was just wondering if you had considered looking at them separately, or what you think you might find if you did look at them separately.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Thank you. So yeah, these items, it's so possible to consider them as conceptually different, and I think just didn't really have a theoretical reason in the literature as it exists to look at them separately, but I think that's a really good idea, and it may be beneficial to do that. Yeah, so thanks for the suggestion.
Thanks, Michael.
All right, thank you.